expect a lot of things from the collaboration between Azure and OpenAI. And by the way, if there are any questions as we go along, just throw them in the chat. I want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to just throw any questions in the chat. But the whole goal of this session is just really to give you a very, very high level overview of the service itself on Azure, and just spark some interest into business use cases that you could use or build to solve for customers. We're actually already using the OpenAI service to solve business problems for customers. So I hope this just sparks a bit of interest. And so I will get going with this. And just before I go into the slide, I'll just introduce myself shortly. So my name is Nikhil. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vastmindz, which is a Microsoft for Startups company. The company actually did win the Microsoft Partner of the Year award last year against all the startups. I'm also an AI engineer myself. I was actually the winner of an OpenAI hackathon that was hosted in November last year. So I'm very familiar with how the API works and the limitations as well with this service. So if you've used the OpenAI API directly through the company, it's very similar to that of the Azure OpenAI API. But I mean, one thing I'm extremely passionate about is using Azure Cognitive Services, which I think is a powerful suite of services to get to market as fast as possible. And now OpenAI serves as part of that suite. But I've explored the suite. I've done several videos on using one or more services within this suite to actually build a SaaS solution that can be productized and sold to customers. So I really think there is a powerful set of tools here that you can use to get to market as fast as possible. So really passionate about this this suite, especially for developers. But one of the questions I wanted to solve today with the OpenAI service is rather than just talk about the service in general, just wanted to maybe pique some interest about how you could solve a potential business problem, or actually even build your own business product. And I don't know if you've seen on the news, but as Microsoft is considering its $10 billion investment, there's a lot of talk around how Microsoft will integrate OpenAI into its Office products. And that, of course, includes Outlook 365. And I think one of the questions it may solve is how many hours do we spend processing emails per day? And just to focus on the problem a little bit more, we actually spend a lot of time processing emails. On average, the average person spends about 2.24 hours per day, which is in total 24 days per year, processing emails. So if we can use OpenAI to increase the productivity of which we can process emails, then even by 50%, that we save ourselves 12 days every year. Which we could do something else. But it's a huge amount of time we spend processing emails. Again, any increase in productivity would be massively helpful. And this is where we can bring OpenAI into the picture. And one of the kind of solution architectures using OpenAI is this right here, and it's very simple. Really, the solution would require you to access the Outlook 365 inbox, which it could do through the Graph API. But what you want it to do is you'd want it to read your emails, so you don't have to, essentially. You'd want it to categorize your emails. So one category of, for example, could be, let's say we are a startup or another business. We'd want to categorize any sales opportunities. We'd want to categorize any investment opportunities. We'd want to categorize any customer support emails. So rather than just trailing through hundreds of emails in an inbox one by one, you'd be able to categorize them using the OpenAI service and therefore prioritize them more efficiently, depending what team you're in. So especially if you wanted to increase the productivity of a sales team, we could categorize all emails that are sales opportunities and direct them to the sales team to process as soon as possible. The other thing we want to do is we want to generate suggested responses to each of your emails. So not only can we categorize them, but we also want to generate responses to each of the emails. Now, if you were to build this, I always like when we're building a product like this, I always like to kind of hypothesize who the target market would be. And if we were to consider if we were to sell this as a standalone SaaS solution, usually you'd want to target small teams, and you'd want to target startup entrepreneurs. And this is a hypothesis. And you could target other business units, but I would say it's always good to start with a niche target market when you're selling a new SaaS solution, just so you can gauge interest from this market. And likely, if it works in one target market, it will work everywhere else. So this is just a quick fun hypothesis of who I think would be a great buyer persona and who the initial target market would be for this type of product. But if we actually look at the technical architecture behind this, there's a couple of things we'll have to do. So the first is that we'll need to authenticate with the Microsoft Graph API. So for any Azure or for any Outlook 365 user, to be able to get access to their emails, to be able to read emails, to be able to send emails, we need to authenticate with the Microsoft Graph API. And I don't know how many people are familiar with using the Graph API in this call, but it's a very powerful tool to get user analytics on any Outlook 365 user. And Microsoft does have a Graph Explorer, which you can go ahead and test out. And actually, in fact, just so it's very clear, if I go to Microsoft Graph, there we go, Graph Explorer, you can actually test out without, this is a very easy to use no-code interface, which you can use to test out the Graph API. So as you can see, there are various endpoints that you could use to get information about yourself. So for example, you would just sign in, it would show you which tenant you are under. You can run queries, and if I run this query, for example, it would give me this response, and it showed me my display name, given name, job title, and so on. It's a powerful tool. I can even get information about my current calendar. If any of you ever use a tool called Viva Insights, Viva Insights uses Graph API heavily to get information on your upcoming meetings. And Viva Insights also tries to schedule for you large blocks of focus time for you to concentrate throughout the day. And it does that by first accessing your, I think, do we have a question coming in? Or maybe not? Okay, no worries, I'll carry on. But it does that by accessing your calendar, looking at all of your available meetings, and scheduling time when it thinks you can spend some time focusing on a particular piece of work. So Graph API is very powerful. I definitely encourage anyone to check it out. I'll also put the link in the chat as well. But if we go back to the architecture here, so a couple of things we'll need to do. We need to authenticate with the Graph API. Using the Graph API, we can then fetch a number of emails. And so we can pull down a list of emails. Now we could later configure this part to only pull down, let's say, for example, focused emails, because as you know, Outlook 365 categorizes email into either focused or other, with focused being more important. Generally, other emails are come under marketing emails or other emails which are not so important. But for now, we'll consider simple architecture. So we'll pull down a bunch of emails. Now, when you do pull in emails, they do come in a slightly strange format. So there will need to have that you will need to actually pass those emails in some way. And I'll just show you for anyone who is interested. I will show you exactly what happens when you ask Graph API to fetch a bunch of emails. So for example, it would fetch emails, it would fetch an array of emails within this value key. And it's just simply an array of JSON objects which have information about an email. And you can see this whole object is one email, and it is, I can see the subject line, I can see the body preview. I can also see the raw body, which is in HTML. So I'll need to pass this entire HTML block to be able to actually be able to get the important points in the meeting itself, in the email itself. So you can see there's a lot of probably regular expression parsing we need to do to actually get this in a format which is understandable. So I just wanted to show you this is exactly how an email is delivered through the Graph API. So once we pass that, then we can actually start using the Azure OpenAI service, and we can use it first to generate a classification. So we can ask OpenAI to classify whether certain emails either are a sales opportunity, investment opportunity, or any other category that we choose. And then we can also use Azure OpenAI to generate a response. So a couple of things I want to touch on before we look at some high-level code. I do want to touch on how you would get set up on Azure OpenAI, because I do get this question a lot. So I'm not sure how many people have subscribed to this service. But what you'd have to do is you'd have to navigate over to Azure Cognitive Services. And then you would head over to Azure OpenAI Service. And you just go ahead and click on it. Now, from what I understand, there still is a wait list for this service, but you can go ahead and click Apply Now. And you'd have to fill in this sheet. So it would ask for simple information like your first name, last name, everything else. So you'll have to fill in this sheet to actually be able to get access to this service. But it's a very simple form. And once you click submit, you should get an email within, I would say, at least 7 to 10 days of whether you've been accepted into this program. Now, once you have, this would be available under your subscription ID in the Azure portal. So once you've been assigned to this, you would head over to the Azure portal, assuming you have an Azure subscription at this point. So that's an important prerequisite. So this is my Azure portal. Obviously, I have a bunch of other resource groups and services running. But what you want to do is you want to head over to Cognitive Services. And you want to create a resource for Azure OpenAI. So you'd go ahead, you'd click Create here. And you want to create a service. It's that simple. So you would either want to create a new resource group, assign it a name, and then assign the pricing tiers. And you can view the pricing tiers. I would start with standard SO for now. If you're probably already familiar with how OpenAI works, they charge based on the amount of tokens that are processed. So I would go ahead and just look at the first tier for now. But it's that simple to create a service. Now, I've already created a service, so I will show you exactly how my service setup looks like. But once you've created a service, and I've just called this Azure OpenAI-our company, on the overview page, you'll be able to see, you'd actually be able to navigate over to the Explore window. So let's go ahead and check out what this is. Okay, great. So this is the Azure OpenAI Studio, and it works in a very similar way to the OpenAI Playground. It is just hosted within the Azure infrastructure. So for example, you can get some code samples. You can even open the Azure OpenAI Playground, and you can use this. Looks very similar to the OpenAI Playground, but if anyone is not familiar with the Playground, I will just summarize exactly what you can do here. So this Playground you can use to test how the model is able to generate text or tokens. You can also play around with some parameters here. Usually temperature is the most fiddled with parameter, and it is a sense of how random the outputs will be. So as you put temperature down to 0, you'll get repeatable and similar answers. If you increase the temperature, the model will allow for some more randomness and variation. But you can go ahead and play with this Playground. Now, in the context of our use case, let's consider this example. We'd want to, let's say, summarize an email into certain categories. So we would generate a very simple prompt to say that we would tell OpenAI to say that your job is to categorize incoming emails into one of the following categories. We would list some here. So we would say, for example, let's call this investment opportunity. Let's also call this sales opportunity. Let's call this customer support. And we can just stick with 4 categories for now and other. Great. So now we will write a fake email. So let's write an email which may be, for example, a customer support query. Say, for example, hi, I am currently having issues with using your SaaS product. Is there, I think this might be a bug. Can you please check this for me? Now, I would classify that as a customer support email if I saw it. And the way that OpenAI works is it works on completions. So you have to be able to construct a prompt in a certain way and be very clear about what the model will complete on. So what I've done here is I've not only specified an email, but I've also specified a placeholder for a response and left this blank. And that gives clarity to the model that it has to complete this response. And so if I go ahead and click generate, yep, it correctly came up with the classification of customer support. And if I go ahead and let's choose let me write another email. Hi there, I am interested in licensing your SaaS product. Can you please give me some pricing. Yeah, I would classify that as a sales opportunity and see how it does there. Great, sales opportunity gets it pretty much right every time. And then we can let's try investment opportunity. Let's say hi there, I am interested to participate in your, and let's avoid writing the word investment. Let's avoid making it too easy. So if I was to send an email about an investment opportunity, I would say, hi there, I'm interested to participate in your capital raising round. Do you have any allocation open for me? Right, so I haven't mentioned the word investment. Let's see how it does. Yep, investment opportunity. So we could be pretty confident that this entire prompt is generating pretty good responses. And when you want to be able to actually take this and use it within your application, you can just hit this button here, code view, and you'll get your complete sample code that you can copy and paste into Python or even into JSON or Perl. It doesn't matter. For the purposes of this tutorial, we'll be going through a Python code. So you can directly get your prompt. It already has your prompt configured here. You don't need to do anything else. You probably need to, though, adjust this prompt so there is a placeholder for the email, for incoming emails, but we'll go over that a little bit later. But the whole essence is you can use your playground to experiment with prompts, and once you're confident that your prompt is producing correct outputs, you could then go ahead and transform this into code and deploy this into your application. I think, Kasam, do we have a question?
Actually, I raised my hand.
Okay.
Just wanted to know, like, is this prompt is responding based on the deployment option we have selected on the top, that dependency, or is it something coming from the Azure OpenAI service itself, or we have deployed on top of it something? The deployment.
Yeah. So your question is the response based on this deployment here, which is DaVinci?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So DaVinci is probably one of the most popular large language models from OpenAI. The way you can create a deployment on Azure OpenAI is very simple. So one thing that's actually a good point, because I would say that other models offered by OpenAI do have different performances. So you can actually go ahead and create a new deployment. So you'd first have to select from a variety of models here. Now, this prompt is dependent on which model you select. For general text and for the majority of NLP tasks, you would select Text DaVinci 3. Text Query, Text Adder are also good, and there is some trade-off between speed and accuracy. But I would say the model that encapsulates the best speed and accuracy trade-off is DaVinci. So if you go ahead and create a deployment here, please ensure that it is on DaVinci. That would be my recommendation. There are other deployments that you can use to serve different functions. So for example, a more advanced function would be to use, let's say, embeddings, which comes under a different model. I think that is a text similarity, one of these similarity models here. But DaVinci 3 is definitely the best for general text tasks. My current deployment is actually based on Text DaVinci 002. There is an upgraded version of this model, which is 003, which does perform significantly better. So definitely, creating a deployment is very easy. You just click here, create a new deployment. You name it whatever you like, select the model. But my recommendation is to avoid getting confused. Start off with Text DaVinci 003. It has the best trade-off for speed and accuracy. So I hope that answers your question, Kasam.
Yes, Nikhil. Yes, thank you very much. Actually, the other day I was just trying to have like playing with Chat GPT APIs with the OpenAI, not with Azure OpenAI, with the OpenAI's
Yeah.
website, and I was just trying to get it into the .NET application. And at that time, I have selected this text DaVinci 002. So I was just a bit confused, like what exactly which model is being used over here, like. But yeah,
Oh, I see.
yeah.
Yes. So when you create your deployment, you would select your model, and then you'd select your deployment name. Now, out of interest, Kasam, in that use case, were you trying to get the OpenAI to produce, let's say, code behind a .NET application based on a prompt?
Yes. So I was trying to have a console application wherein I added
Yeah.
this API and passed this the temperature, the tokens, and this prompt. And basically,
Yeah.
this was the default model which it was it added as 002. But there
Yeah.
were some other models too, but it was not recommended as per their site. So I was my confusion was what exactly which model is being supported by Azure OpenAI services. So is it
Got it.
002, right? But you recommend it as 003.
Yeah, 0.0.0.0.3 has been recently added to the Azure OpenAI service, so I would definitely recommend to choose Text DaVinci 003 as the
Okay.
underlying model.
Yeah.
But especially if you're looking for a task which is generating code based on a string prompt, definitely use Code DaVinci. So I've already created a deployment for this is one of the Codex series of models. And they perform much better when creating code blocks based on any given prompt. So I definitely recommend to check out Code DaVinci
Yes.
002. So you may have already tried that, but just an FYI for people not familiar with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Thank you.
Great, great. I think we had another question in the chat from Ranajit. So is this sample code available only in Python? So actually, no. So this sample code is available. You have Python, JSON, and Curl. So yes, it's limited in terms of the options, but you could mimic this in JavaScript or any other language that you choose to do so. But yeah, the most popular framework to use OpenAI is Python. But I will actually, what I will do is I will just, I'll go back to my presentation. What I did want to go over is just some sample code that you could use. And I will deploy this on my GitHub so that anyone can pull this down and have a go. But if I go ahead and just let's look at some high level code. So nothing too heavy right now. It's just very high level code that I think would be a good start if we were to build a similar application to this. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and share my desktop. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've created a script called Azure OpenAI.py. Again, all of this will be publicly available in my repository, so no need to memorize or follow with me here. But what I've done is I've just configured the Azure OpenAI API. And there's two tasks I want to achieve here. So I'll need to set two different prompts. This is all just about configuring the OpenAI API. So the first prompt is similar to what I showed you in the playground. So the first thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to, I'll zoom in a little bit. The first thing I want to be able to do is I want to be able to classify emails into a category, right? So I understand which emails I can deal with first. The second thing I want to do is generate a prompt. And this prompt is even simpler. I just say, create a response to the following email, only respond to emails that are directed to Nikhil. And then I used to use these curly brackets so that I can put a placeholder in for when I need to insert an email into here. And I've just defined two functions for classifying an email and also generating a response. You can see here the engine I'm using is DaVinci, which is synonymous with my deployment in Azure. And all I'm doing is allowing for one argument to pass through this parameter, which is an email body. So once I pass an email body through this function, I'm just formatting the classification prompt with this email body, which will place the email here. And the same thing will happen for generate response. So I'll pass an email body through this, I'll format this, and hopefully it should generate a response. Now, if I was to test this, I'd specify, let's say, an email body of, hi, I'm looking to license your product. Can you help me out? If I was to run this, you'd be able to see in the terminal that is classified this as a sales opportunity. And it's also generated a response from me, which is, hi, thank you for your interest in licensing on the product. We'd be happy to help you out. Please let us know what product you're interested in licensing. Right, it looks like a pretty good response. The response may need some work, but it's a pretty good start. The other script I've configured as well is a Python script that interacts with the Graph API. And I have some more details on my repo about how you can configure this. Just the main thing you'll need to do is you'll need to register a new application on Azure Active Directory. You need to specify the application ID. I thought you needed to do directory ID and client secret too, but it turns out that's not the case. And then you need to specify authority URL, base URL, and then also the scopes, which are effectively permissions. And I want to be able to, if I'm going to be reading an individual's inbox, I want to be able to read and write, and also I put read basic there, which is another permission scope. But I won't go through all of these functions in details because I just want to show you a high-level overview of what is possible here. But in effect, we have a function here which can generate an access token from the Graph API. And then we have a bunch of functions here, which let's just minimize these first. Yeah, then we have a bunch of functions here which do certain things with the Graph API. So we have all mails, which just looks at the base URL, which is this graph base URL, and it specifies how many messages or how many emails I would like to receive. So I just simply have two arguments. I have to pass in the access token, number of mails, and I'll be able to get a certain number of emails from my inbox. I've even created a function to get only the focused emails. And the way I do that is by modifying this string to filter for focused emails. And the way you do that is by filtering via inference classification. And again, this is exactly how you do it. Again, all of the code will be available on the GitHub repo, so no need to memorize any of this. And then you would simply call another get endpoint. So, and then I've specified some other functions, such as if you recall, the body of an email from Graph API is in HTML form. So I've created a bunch of other functions for getting the body of the email, which is the raw HTML. Also getting the text from the HTML document, and this is a little bit more about how do we pass using regex the HTML script or the content, so we can extract the raw text. And then this function is about the next function is about parsing the email. So we just retain only relevant information from the email. So we want to get, maybe we want to get information about the ID, the subject, the receive date, the from to inference classification. That's pretty important. And also the body. I think that's all we need for now. We can always add in things later. And then I've also wanted to structure a prompt in a certain way. So when I append, if you look at this script here, when I place an email here, I want to place it in a nice format so that OpenAI can properly read this. And this is the whole point of this function, structuring the prompt. So I want to be able to have to explicitly say, this is the subject of the email, this is from, this is to, date, content. That's pretty much it, and that's pretty much all we need for now. So you can go ahead, use these functions, no need to build them yourself. If you're familiar with Python, it'll be pretty easy to get going. The only thing you will likely need is an application ID, but you can use my own application ID. I already have an app registration in Azure AD, which is assigned to this. But if we go ahead into the main function, which is putting it all together. So a couple of things I do here. First, I import all of the function I just built from the Graph API script, and that includes functions to get emails and pass those emails. I also import the functions from Azure OpenAI, which is really only two. We only need to be able to classify and generate responses. Now, if we generate it, what I've done here is I've just generated a Streamlit application, which is a easy to use application interface that could be built in Python. It's just a way to demonstrate the output of certain applications. So very lightweight, very easy to use. Not much you can do with it, but it's good as a quick demo. So what I'm doing is I'm just initiating a Streamlit application here, assigning a button to sign in with the Microsoft Graph API. And this is when it actually generates an access token based on my application ID and scopes, which I specified in this script here, based on my application ID and scopes. So hopefully, once that is done, and it successfully generated the access token. In fact, I will write this text here on the Streamlit application. So I'll say write successfully signed into the Microsoft Graph API. Then what I want to do is I want to get a bunch of emails. Now, I've only specified getting the last 10 emails for now, just so I can demonstrate to you how this works. And then what I'd want to do is for every email in the value object, which is an array of emails, I'd want to pass the email first. I'd want to get the email body. And this is where I can pass this email body into the classification and generation functions. And then I'd simply want to display what the Azure OpenAI AI thought was the classification of that email and the response. It's as simple as that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and run this. So I will hit Streamlit, run main.py. Okay, so it's just deploying to my local host. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to hit sign into Microsoft Graph API and we will see what happens. Hopefully it should start magically pulling in my own emails and start classifying and generating responses. So if I hit that, successfully signed into the Microsoft Graph API, there we go, it starts bringing in emails. So we've got one email here. So it's classified this as other. This looks like a marketing email for me. Stories for Nikhil Sehgal, become a member. Yeah, this looks like a general marketing email. We've got the classification here as other, which I would say is correct. And it's actually generated a response. I mean, we should probably tell the model that it doesn't need to generate responses to other emails, but it's actually generated a response saying, hi, Sunil, thanks for sharing these articles with me. I'm looking for new ways to grow my email list and engage my audience. So yeah, it's pretty funny. But if we look at another email, again, this looks like another newsletter email to me, a controversial memo by Sequoia Capital, which is a large VC fund. To see how this is classified this. Well, see, this is interesting. It's classified this as an investment opportunity. And so whilst this is a direct investment opportunity, this is talking about pre-seed equity investment. So it is along the right line, but of course there is some improvements to be made, and there has actually generated a response as well. If we have a look at another one. Hey, Nikhil, I know you're super busy. So this looks like another marketing email that was sent to me. I know you are super busy, so floating this back to your inbox in case it slipped through. If you're interested in TopMate, so TopMate is a newsletter service. It's a sales opportunity, which is it's not as if someone is looking to license my product. There's a sales opportunity, and then it's generated a response here. So hi, Ankit. Thank you for reaching out to me about TopMate. I'm definitely interested in learning more about the product and how it can help me grow my personal brand. Please send me a personalized link so I can look at it. So you can imagine like a button being available on Office 365, which is, let's say, call this a generate button. So you're just going through your emails, clicking generate, generate, generate. I think some work has to be done to the response, which we'll discuss in a second. But you get the general overview that it's a pretty powerful tool, especially in conjunction with Microsoft Graph API, to be able to actually understand emails, classify them, and generate response, which can generally take that whole process to process emails can generally take an individual up to 2 hours per day, just sitting there processing emails. So even saving 50% of that time generates an extra 12 days per year for any individual. So that is a quick overview of how it works. Of course, there are some limitations, so I'd encourage you to play with this, see what it does for you. But one of the things one of the other improvements I thought would be pretty useful for this type of service is definitely fine-tuning the responses. So one of the key things with OpenAI, it is just a general large language model. You definitely want to be able to fine tune this. So it would be good to actually say, okay, here are a list of all the emails I've ever been sent, and here's how I usually respond. So you would have, let's say, thousands of rows of paired emails that have been sent to you and your responses, and you can actually fine tune OpenAI to respond how you would respond, even in keeping contextual information about certain things. So let's say, for example, if you've had questions about your specific product in the past, if you fine tune the model will be able to spit out that contextual information about your specific product. So it becomes very highly personalized when you fine tune the model. The other thing I thought of doing was building a simple Teams app, which could maybe show you classification of your emails across a number of emails. And then also one thing that would be good to improve upon is actually implementing direct sending API. So users can send emails directly from the application. So you effectively just now have a user which is generating responses through the inbox and sending emails directly through the API. But of course, there are a lot of improvements to make. There's just the whole purpose of this was to show you a quick overview of the capabilities of Azure OpenAI into a simple business application. So I hope that was helpful. Happy to answer any questions. Please connect with me on LinkedIn if you haven't already. Also happy to follow up individually for anyone looking to get a bit deeper into the service. We do use OpenAI for a number of business problems, so happy to discuss that. And again, Kasam, thank you for inviting me for this call. I think we do have some time for questions, so happy to open the floor to any questions.